Education cannot wait. We often get this question when it comes to financing, and the biggest question is always, what is your added value? And we have come to the point where we have said, we don't need 5 pages to explain that, or even 2 pages. There's one sentence or one paragraph. Education cannot wait follows populations. Refugees, internally displaced, girls, adolescent girls, children with disabilities, who are all caught in conflict or climate-induced disasters. We follow populations, we work with host governments, but people is our #1 priority. And that's where you see education cannot wait. In a country like Central African Republic, we have territories controlled by 12 different militia groups. That's where education cannot wait goes. Or Afghanistan, where you have territories controlled by Taliban. Or Yemen, where you have territories controlled by de facto government, but not by the jure government. For us, it's about the people in need in the most abnormal circumstances. This is what we consider those left furthest behind and the most marginalized. We have 2 ways of addressing finances. #1 premise is the following. When you operate in a conflict crisis country, you cannot rely on domestic financing alone. Why? Because democratic governance, the rule of law, the whole of system approach is not working. And if you're going to have a proper recovery effort, you need a whole of system approach. Education alone cannot stand on its own. You need the entire governance system to function. And the reason that you have a conflict or a crisis is precisely because there's disintegration of the governance structures. So that's #1. Therefore, for us, ODA funding and private sector funding is our top priority. As long as a country is in crisis, or low-income countries or lower middle-income countries is affected by heavy refugee hosting, you've got to come in with ODA or private sector. So that's how we operate. And we have 2 windows. We have the first emergency response, where we put seed fundings 1 year to deal with onset of crisis or an escalation of a crisis, whether it's a cyclone in Zimbabwe or there is an escalation of crisis in Syria, where our ODA partners, private sector, can offer top-up funding. We've seen that from the USA, the UK, and others. Or the second window, which is the multi-year humanitarian development coherence, or the nexus, as we call it, which is multi-year, where we put seed funds and then other ODA or private sector partners can beef up. And we have calculated that if the currently 10 of our multi-year resilience programs were fully funded in the Sahel, in Central African Republic, in South Sudan, among the Rohingyas, if they were all fully funded, we would reach 16 million children left furthest behind from SDG 4. So it's a matter of financing only. To conclude, ECW, we have, in discussions with our strategic donor partners, we come to the conclusion we are all facing COVID-19. There is an economic recession. And why dreaming is great, and I'm a great dreamer, you also have to understand the realities on the ground. So we have revised our ask to all our strategic donor partners. And we are saying, if you can support us with $400 million in 2021 and 2022, with this little, we can make a huge difference. Why? Because we are a cost-effective organization. Our staff in headquarters is the same size as a classroom, no more than 30 people. Who are doing the real job? It's the civil society organizations, it's the UN agencies, it's the Ministry of Education. They are doing the job. We are just the catalysts. But with $400, we can make a huge difference. So that's how we look at financing. It's possible, it's a dream, but it's a very realistic one. You know, when you come into a conflict situation or a crisis country, and you have a large segment of marginalized children and youth, it is often very strongly related to the fact that that conflict has a disintegrated governance structure and therefore is in conflict. Don't have the processes in place to resolve conflict or tensions peacefully through democratic means. So marginalized children is by default um, a sign of a conflict or crisis country. Okay, they're not just there randomly; they are there as a result of it. They are the targets of it. That's why it's so important to apply humanitarian principles and imperatives. Because if you don't want the world to know that girls are being hidden away or that children with disabilities are being hidden away, you're not going to get that information. They are not in the nice plans. They are the ones that fall through the cracks of the plans, cracks of the planning. But if you apply humanitarian imperatives and principles, you make an objective assessment and you go and you find them. And we find them through our colleagues on the ground, the UN agencies, the Ministry of Education, and the civil society and the local organization that knows their communities. But when you're in a crisis country, don't expect to get a report that tells you, here are the marginalized girls, they're hidden away, the marginalized boys, or the LGBTQT community, or the children with disabilities. We don't expect that. It's almost bordering naive. And that's what ICW does. By working at the community level and the partners, we have objective assessments that we bring and discuss with the government, provided that it's done with the protection of the children and the youth that we serve. So that's how we operate on the one hand. The other one is that when we look at children with disabilities, or we look at girls and adolescent girls, and I met many of them on the borders of Ethiopia, in Somaliland, in the villages of Afghanistan, you see that they are very strong. They are not victims in the way that we like to call them. They're actually very resilient. What they are lacking is the tools. So we focus on them as actually very resilient and powerful people. They are children with other abilities, not just with disabilities. Or they're adolescent girls who are future female leaders. You know, when you shift your perspective of them, dynamics are shifting because you're seeing power inside them. You also take a holistic approach. You know, Leonardo da Vinci, the great Italian artist, once said, learn how to see, connect the dots. So we focus on the whole of child approach, that it's not just numerical skill or literacy skills or cell, but you're looking at mental health and psychosocial services. You're looking at the digital divide that Jaime discussed. You are looking at the full spectrum of what the child needs for their development. And I do agree that the digital divide is becoming one of our most urgent, I would say, human rights in the 21st century, and COVID-19 has revealed. You also have to take affirmative action for girls. We have 60% in every one of our investments. So I think these are some of the examples. Let me conclude with a shout out for one of our fellow NGO organizations, Their Word, because we're speaking about SDG 4. They have a new finance playbook, Their Word, on how we can mobilize resources to meet the full cost of all SDGs. And it's about to be published. So I really call on everyone to look into Their Word's forthcoming playbook on how we together and jointly can mobilize to meet the full cost of SDG 4. The money is there. There is an abundance in this world. Now it's about solidarity. The money, the finances are available. Now it's about solidarity and humanity and translating political action, not just into beautiful words, but into absolutely bold action. And the way we do it will determine our humanity. Thank you.